Hi guys, this is Brian again from Geeked Out Solutions, and today we're back with another new video on officially how to create your own Mycroft skill. So today I found an easy API called Today in History that I just Googled and found this one here at muffinlabs.com. And it's easy enough because basically their API is pretty straightforward. Like when you go here, you can see that they just kind of give it to you straight from the date, right? So you just have to go to this website. And so I'll kind of show you if we just pull this page up, you'll see there's just a bunch of output, right? So it knows the day and it knows about today. So we don't have to worry about date, time, or anything like that. So we're going to start building this, and I'm going to show you how I would build this skill and how I did build this skill for the video, and then kind of show you how it would go, the whole process would go along there. So what I'm going to do is actually build this on a website called Cloud9. If you're not familiar with Cloud9, then they're just a really cool solution for doing development in the cloud, and you can collaborate with people and obviously have different things. So if you can see that I've got all of my different stuff there and everything, right? So basically I've created a went ahead and created a an actual workspace inside of Cloud9, and I've gone ahead and put some code in here. And basically all that we're doing is we're going to import the requests library that's already native to Mycroft. It's already installed and already ready to go. And all we're doing is passing in the URL for requests, right? Requests needs that URL when we call something here in a minute. So we're going to give it the URL with that we found here for the date, right? So this is a part of the API that gives us back all this data here. And so the next line, I'm basically setting, setting a variable or to this request.get URL. So I'm going to call this URL with the module request and get that information back, and it's going to come back and basically like in an object is what I'm going to get here. And so that's what I'm going to do. And so I've got the request here. I'm going to hide that for now. And so if I save this right now and if I just print R dot, and you can see that with Cloud9, it kind of tabs out and shows you your different options here. So if you look down, there's a bunch of different ones. There's JSON output, there's the date, there's just some different data. Right now, I want to show you that it came in successful, right? So we want to make sure that the status, which I can't find here, maybe they're not doing a status code. Okay, so I guess we're just going to do r.text and print that. And you'll see it's just a bunch of data, right? Like, it's a lot of information here, and it's all in text format, which is really kind of hard to understand and deal with. And you can also see we've got kind of a dict, this is part of the dict object from earlier on that I had, but that's what we're going to get to in a second. So either way, when we print it, it's just this big bulky thing of text, right? So there's a thing that we saw earlier called JSON. And so if you call JSON with the two parentheses like that, which I've done right here below, you can see that I've created a variable called JSON output, and I'm making it equal to that JSON value. So now if I print JSON output, we're going to save this and run it again. You'll see that I'm now getting JSON related data. I don't know why it's showing weird here. Let me make sure I don't have any other weird print statements. Can we clear this out maybe? Yeah, I don't know why it's showing the weird stuff. Either way, this is a JSON object, so I could show you basically to make it clear. So we're just going to say this is the JSON data. And by using the double brackets like that, I'm able to then do a dot format. And you can see it's like tabbing things out for me so I can kind of get information about what I need. So I'm going to do a parentheses, and then we're going to close off that other parentheses there. So you can see like when I highlight it or to the right of it, you could see that it tells me, okay, that terminates on that one terminates on that parentheses. You can see it's kind of doing the little highlight thing there. So now if I save this and run it, we should get an output that'll tell us this is the JSON output somewhere in here. Maybe at the top. Yeah. So this is the JSON data. And so you can see it's all this. And now it's in a, dictionary format, which is a lot easier to kind of, get through. So when I'm building skills like this, where I'm working with an API or I'm working with, some type of screen scraping or whatever, I personally prefer to get this output in JSON. And typically, I also prefer to make sure I get a status code back. For this site, they don't seem to do a status code, but normally I would do like an r dot status code of make sure it's at least like a 200 or something before I continue, because that tells me that it's successful. But either way, so we're going to get this, we have this in JSON output now, right? So now we can do this cool little thing with a dictionary, because we know now that JSON output is a dictionary because we took the JSON data and made it now this dictionary here. So I can print keys, right? So if I tab this out like we've been showing you, so there's different options, right? This is just an object at this point, or a dictionary rather, sorry. So these are all the different things in it, or some of the different different information. But basically, I know since it's a dictionary, I can do keys like this, and I'm gonna hide this data now to make it easier to see. So now you can see these are the keys, right? So now we've got some keys to go on for JSON output. We have date, URL, and data. So let's see what's in each of these, right? And we can do that pretty easily. We can just do a print after this, and we're going to do JSON output. For dictionaries, you do it like this, right? So we would want date, so we give it that value. And then if I want the URL, I'm going to do that. And then the final data in the dictionary, we want to see what's in there, is going to be the actual data, which I think is going to be what has everything, right? So now if we save this and run it again, did a crappy job probably of putting it all together. Yeah, I did. But you could see that this is the date. This is the URL, actually, this, which is what they're calling. They're just basically calling Wikipedia, it looks like, where some of this information is pulled from. And then we have the last object, which is data. So you can see this is another dictionary. So let's see what's in that dictionary, right? And another easy way of doing this is doing what I've done here. So I'm going to get rid of all of these now. And now you can see I've got output equal to JSON output and now the data object. So I'm basically saying, okay, call this data pattern, which is really starting here, right? Which we know is another dictionary. So now if I do print output.keys, we're going to get the information from the keys and see what's in that dictionary, right? Which is all that data that we want to house. And so we can see they've got it split into birth, events, and deaths. And we know this is right because if we look at their actual website again, you'll see today in history they have events, they have births, and then they have deaths, right? So this is the way that their data is housed. And you can read through this API and see this is how it's working. I'm just trying to show you. So now, for this particular skill, I'm just gonna focus on events. But if I wanted to, for example, you wanted to see all of the data in each of these, the easiest way we can do it now that we know the keys, right? We're gonna take and say events is equal to output events, right? Birth is equal to output births, and deaths is going to be the output and deaths. So now if I wanted to see what's in deaths, for example, it's going to be a lot of data if I just print the whole thing. So I can do this and only print the first object inside of that dict. And remember, these are zero based, so 0 is actually the first object and 1 would be the second object. So if I save this now and run it, you'll see this was the first object inside of there, and it's a dict object with just the text version and then an HTML version. And then it has some links as well. So to make this easier, we're just going to deal with deal with events, like I said. So now we're just going to make this events and see what is that first event. And you can see that the event is the Roman Emperor General Tiberius defeats the, Dalmatae, I think is how it's pronounced, on the river Bothnus, I think is it, right? So we just want the text version for our example and our skill because we just want to say that out loud, right? So to do that, we can very easily, instead of doing print events now, we could tab it all out, but to just make it simple, we could say, okay, I want the today's event, for example, to be equal to events 0, and then we're going to call inside of that the text. So now if I print today's event and I get rid of this one now, you'll see we get Roman Emperor, right? It just gives us the text version. So now we have all the code basically right here that we need to build our skill. So from this point, you're probably going to ask, well, how do we build the skill, right? Like, how do we get started if we really don't know Python, or if we do somewhat know Python? How do we kind of build from a cookie cutter and read and see how it works and go from there? So the way you can do that is if you go over to the docs. I'm not going to explain in super great detail what each piece of this does. The documents do a very good job here of doing that. But when you come to the docs, it talks to you about your first skill, and it mentions you can go to Hello World and you could pull and clone this skill, right? And this is a good starter skill to basically clone and then build upon and modify, or whatever you need to do. Excuse me, if you want to build a new skill and you don't want to have to start from scratch. And that's kind of what I typically do. I just clone the base template that I made from the main skills repo, which is basically this skill, and then clean it up. And that's what I use for a template for each one I built. So you would just clone this, download it local to your machine or whatever, modify the code however you want, and then that can be your new one that you push up to GitHub, which I'll do in a separate video coming up. So either way, this talks about the skill and how to build it. So what we're going to do here is I've already basically built and finished. I haven't modified the README, so we're going to just modify this real quick. This is from the template, and I'm just going to call this real quick Mycroft skill, Mycroft today in history event skill, right? And then I'm just going to say this skill does something, and we'll fill this out in a minute after I show you how the skill works. So I've got the code here already. If you want to pull it down and see how all this works, I'll have it in the YouTube link. So basically what I've done is I took the template from the, sorry, don't need that. I took the template from that link, right? So I went here, cloned this locally, and that's why, and then I modified it for this, right? So now you're looking at that template code here. And so what we're doing, and I'm going to pull this over to the right so we can have both. And so you'll see that we can take our code now and build our skill. So what I've done is I've got the main init file here, which is called that starts everything. And inside of it is the boilerplate code that I've already modified. So you can see what I've done is I've named the class today history skill, which this is based off of. I'm just going to show you this for an example. So you can see it's just hello world skill here. So we're just changing it to today history, right? We're calling this super. This isn't needed anymore, but I need to go through the most recent uh, release and see the notes on that, and I'll update another video where I'll put an appendum an appendum to this. But basically, I don't think you have to do the super anymore, but it still works. So for the example, I'm just going to show it for now. So we're just basically, calling the today skill and initializing it with the today history skill. Like I said, I'm not going to really go over too much of this. It's all documented inside of the main page, and you can see that it's somewhat even documented inside of inside of the main template here. So we're just basically taking the constructor of the skill and setting that up, and then the next piece here is the method and the function that registers the intent that the skill is going to use. And so I'll do a separate video maybe later on actually going through what each of these really do under the covers. But now we're calling a function here, and inside the init function, it's just loading some data files out of a directory or whatever, which you could see is pretty much not really even probably needed. It's just in the base template here. This is needed, I think, if you've got config files or data that you're going to need and pull from. Either way, we've created an intent called random event intent, which you can see is basically the same thing as like a thank you intent over here. And we're just calling it random event intent here because we're going to throw it on a new line. We need the slash there. And then we're going to require the random event keyword, which I'll show you in a second, and then build it, and then we're going to register that intent. So this random event keyword is actually what's going to trigger. So right now I just threw a couple things in here. What event happened this day in history, this day in history, and today in history, for example. So any of these phrases will kick off the skill right now. So that's what we're basically saying, hey, require that keyword for this skill to be triggered, basically. And then when that happens, and then register this intent with the handler. So that way this handler is called, like it says here, the handler function is the behavior that the skill uses when it's triggered, and then it calls this function, basically. So in this case, we're going to call our handle random event intent, which is what we've set here. And the message object, all this is basic. This is what's inside of that message object. You can kind of look through that later in the logger. There's data inside of that, like what the person said and things like that you can reuse for more advanced skills and so forth. If you're curious in code for that, you can look at my Twitter skill. Either way, we're putting our code here, which you can see is from over here. So we've got r is equal to request.get URL. And then JSON output is equal to r.json, right? So this is the same stuff we were doing over here. I'm just setting output to JSON output data. And then I'm basically saying, okay, our events are the output events. And then down here, I'm basically just formatting a speak phrase. You don't need the dialogue unless you want to have multiple ways of saying this. You could have it, have a couple different phrases in the way that it worded this event. But either way, for this purpose, we're just going to speak it. So I'm just doing self.speak, and I'm basically saying today in history, event blah, and this is called from over here, occurred, right? And I'm going to take out that period because it does some weird stuff when you do that. And now I'm doing the dot format, and I'm calling events, and I want the first events object. And then I just want the text version of that. You could also do something cool like do a random. So you could do the random function, like a random module, and pick one of the random, like how many ever are there. So you could randomize that events number there and pick like a different event each time. In this case, I'm just picking I'm just picking the first event that I find each time and using it. So that's what we're doing here. We're speaking it. Then we have the stop self, which is just a basic part of the stop function that allows you to tell it to stop, which will tell it to just quit everything. And then, excuse me, we have def create skill, which is just we're defining a create skill, and that's returning this today in history piece. This is all just part of the boilerplate code for the skill itself. And so now you could see that these are our phrases, right? So what I do is I just take these now, and these become in the README. We don't need anything to get it done, right? So I'm just going to say this skill gives back a event from today in history, right? It uses, I like to put, I'll put you in a second what we're doing, working features. We're just going to put these in here real quick, right? And we don't know about issues or to do, and I'm going to then say it uses this in case people want to know. And so now if we save this, now it looks semi-decent, right? It's got some information and at least people know how to call it or whatever. So now we've saved this. Obviously at this point you would want to push this up to GitHub, right? So the way that you would do that, I think we can go ahead and show you real quick in the video. You would just come here, to your main repo, say, yeah, I want a new repository. Give it a name, right? Like blah, whatever. Create the repository, right? That's going to create a empty shell of a file, sort of like this. I mean, obviously it won't have any of this. It'll just have the README in it. And at that point, you can then just take your URL, clone it, from here, do a git clone from your CLI. So you just do, git clone whatever that URL is, right? Like whatever comes from this piece here, you copy that, and you would just run that, right? Just like that. And that'll then bring you to the folder. You do your modifications, and you're like, oh, I've done my work, whatever I need to do, right? You can then do a git add dot to add all the files in. And if you made changes, you could then do a git, commit message, give it something. This is a initial upload or whatever, right? Hit enter on that. And then you would do a git push origin, and then master is if it's a master branch or whatever. If you have multiple branches, you could do that, right? And then those files would get pushed, and then your files would show up on the main skill here now. So now you would just then basically have an easy way to install this on your Mycroft or Mark 1, whatever. You just copy the URL from this, and then you would install it, right? So you would go to your Mycroft, Mycroft, right? In this case, I'm in the desktop version, so I'm in my core Mycroft core folder, which is by default in the home directory, your home, whatever your username is, /mycroft-core. And in here, you can see that there's an MSM folder, and then inside of that, there's the actual MSM application. So if I do that, and then install, and then give it my URL, it's going to tell me it's already installed. Do you want to update? Whatever. I don't want to, but in this case, it would install it for you. So at that point, you're ready to go, right? Like your Mycroft is good. I'm going to give this a second to kick in, but you'll be able to see that now it's going to know about this, right? So if I do the CLI from here, so we could do that with a start.sh CLI quiet. And once it becomes available, it is 6:06 p.m. You can see that's working, right? So now we can come back over here. This thing should be up, which it is. So I'm now going to ask it, today in history, right?
Today in history event, Roman Empire General Tiberius defeats the Dalmatii on the river Badenus. Occurred.
So you can see how long that took, and I didn't like that dot. That was the reason I took that last period out. So I forgot that I haven't updated this yet, right? So I'll show you kind of how you would install this. So I'm going to remove this skill from my Mycroft by going to the correct directory. So I'm going to do rm-rf opt Mycroft skills. And inside of here, you can see I've got some different skills, but I'm going to do the Mycroft, or sorry, the, what did I name it? There it is, Mycroft skill today in history. So now I'm going to get rid of it. So now if I rerun that MSM command I had a second ago, I hope. Oh, I guess I don't. So we're going to redo it. I'm going to copy that. Don't need that anymore. Go back here. CD. And now we're going to do the MSM install. So now it's installed. So now if I re-ask it,
And history event Roman Empire General Tiberius defeats the Dalmatii on the river Badenus.
I think it's still probably caching it. I'm not going to bother restarting it. In this case, I don't. For those that aren't aware, it sometimes will cache the data if it's the same and it's not refreshed or whatever. So in this case, the easiest way to do that is to restart the services. But in either event, you can see now that we have a working skill, right? We've basically developed our skill. We've created it, to start with inside of Cloud9. You could use IPython, you could use the local interpreter, you could do this on top of on the device if you want. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, but it's possible. And so we then took that code, created our boilerplate information here, threw it in, and then made sure everything was here and saved it, ready to go. The last piece that I'll go over that I forgot to mention is inside of the test intent. You want to just kind of make sure you have an utterance in here, put like the intent type, and then what intent it's going to call. This is just a test JSON data so that people kind of know how it's going to work. I think it's maybe used for other things. I'm really not sure, to be quite honest with you. In either event, that's where that goes. Because we don't have a dialog, this just stays empty. I don't have anything in it. And that's it. That's the structure of the file, right? And like I said, if you want more information specifically about this, I would go to the actual docs.mycroft.ai and then go to the creating a skill section and read through some of this, right? And read through your first skill. And it's really good information. And like I said, if you're not sure or if you find something that's out of date that needs to be updated, you can look at my other video, which I'll have in the description, on how to actually update that information. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you guys learned something from it. If you have questions or concerns, leave them in the comments. If you have information you want for future videos, leave them in the comments. Otherwise, I'll see you in the Mattermost channel, and let me know what you take from this, and we'll go from there. Thanks. Have a good day.